Now then, what's all this about?
I can't help it, really, I can't.
You are, use mine. Tell me all about it.
I can't go on. It's all so awful. I didn't think it would be like this.
Anyway, you don't believe all the gossip you hear, do you? I know this hospital life is pretty frightening at first, but if you're ever going to be a nurse, Joan, you've got to hide your feelings. You've got to grow a crust. We've all got to.
Hello, I'm career transgendered individual Jen Ives, and you are watching / listening to, through podcast, Lobotomy World. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've had a nice week. I'm flying by the seat of my pants a little bit today because the battery on my camera is not fully charged. That's the first warning straight off the bat, okay? Not fully charged. I'm starting this at 65%, which is part of a whole new initiative that I'm taking on called living on the edge, living life on the margins, taking risks, being crazy, being gosh darn out of my mind. Anyway, if you're watching this, you probably know who I am by now. Don't have to go on about it. We're at like 20 episodes or something, aren't we? Look at the title. How many episodes is it? This is the most I've kept up anything like this. So, you know, you keep liking them, I'll keep doing them. That's always been my MO. As long as I receive an adequate amount of attention, I will continue. Got a big topic today, a very large topic, a very huge, exciting, not exciting, kind of exciting, big topic. You probably already have seen from the title. Today we're going to be talking about this gosh darn NHS tribunal, NHS Fife, Sandy Peggy versus Dr. Beth Upton. And I'll be honest, I've been putting this off. I've been putting this one off because this is a doozy. This is a big, annoying, stupid doozy. But you know, at a certain point, you just have to start talking about it because it's in the news and it's an important thing, you know. It's a sort of a landmark thing. In that, you know, what with the Supreme Court ruling and all that nonsense, this happened technically before the Supreme Court ruling, but I think we're going to see, because we don't yet know how it's going to play out 100%. I've got my feelings. I've got my pessimistic feelings, but we don't know. And, you know, the case has been ongoing for a little while now. Don't worry, I will get you up to speed if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Basically, there was this nurse in a hospital. NHS Fife. I've never been to Fife. I'll tell you straight off. Let's get some Fife facts. I'll tell you a little something about Fife because I don't know much about Fife, I'll be honest. So Fife is a what does it say? Is a council area and lieutenancy area in Scotland. So it's in Scotland, apparently. A peninsula, it is bordered by the Firth of Tay in the north. So it's in Scotland, we know that. The area has an area of 512 square miles. So it's quite, you know, it's not very, I mean, it's big, but it's not that big. It may not be a big place, but it's creating big news. It has a resident population of 371,340 as of 2022. Let's see if there's any interesting Fife facts here. Basically, it's the top. You know, if you're looking at a map of the UK, it's right at the top. I wonder if there's any people of note from Fife. I'm sure. I mean, there's usually people of note from everywhere. If you go on Wikipedia and you look up, say you type in Wikipedia, people of note from London, the first thing that pops up, it'll be Jen Ives. It'll say, Jen Ives, comedian, writer, podcaster of the famous Lobotomy World podcast, was born and raised in South London. That's what it will say. Here we go. Notable Fifers. So they're called Fifers. If you're from Fife, you're a Fifer. Ian Banks. He's a good writer. He wrote The Wasp Factory. Have you ever read that? I've read that. And then there's loads of other people who I don't know who they are. That's the only one I know so far. There's like a list of notable Fifers and I'm not seeing... Not even Michelle Pfeiffer is there. No, that's it. That's the only people of note from Fife, except for Sandy Peggy and Dr. Beth Upton. So the reason I've been putting off talking about this is because as a trans person, it's just a bit depressing, isn't it? It's like you hear about these sort of cases. I feel like we're all a little bit inundated with the nonsense, right? Like there's so much nonsense coming our way, both legally, socially, psychically. A psychic has been sending transphobic ghosts to my brain. But I'll get you up to date on this. So these are the characters in the story. And it's an ongoing story. The court case hasn't resolved. But Sandy Peggy, which let's be real, sounds like something uncomfortable that you get from being on the beach for too long. She's a nurse. She's been with this hospital for 30 years. She's a cis woman, although she wouldn't like it if you called her that. She'd be like, I don't know how she sounds. I haven't actually heard her speak. But I imagine, even though I think she's Scottish, I imagine her to sound like this. Don't call me cis. I ain't cis. That's just how I imagine her to speak. She basically got upset because a transgender doctor, yes, we exist, okay? I'm a transgender doctor. Not officially, not legally, not from a medical point of view. But I'm a doctor in the same way that Dr. Pepper is a doctor. I say, hey, my pronouns are DR, doctor / doctor. Have some respect. Basically, Sandy Peggy was in a changing room and Dr. Beth Upton came in. She's the transgender doctor. And according to Sandy Peggy, Dr. Beth Upton started to undress next to her. And, of course, Sandy Peggy was like, a transgender, and got really upset about it. So that's sort of like where this whole thing starts, okay? Now I'm going to take you through it a little bit. So it says here, I've got some notes. A nurse who was suspended after complaining about sharing a changing room with a transgender doctor has denied comparing the medic to a rapist. So she apparently raised her concerns with Dr. Upton, saying, oh, well, you know, how would you feel if you were a woman? I'm not quoting her verbatim here. And you had to share a changing room with, you know, someone who you didn't feel safe in the presence of. And I bet Dr. Beth Upton was just thinking, that's what happened. I don't feel safe around you. You're crazy. You're nuts. Sandy Peggy claims that having to share the room with Dr. Beth Upton, who is a trans woman, amounted to unlawful harassment under the Equality Act. Oh yeah, the Equality Act. She said, and I quote, I told Beth I felt it was unacceptable that he was in the female changing area, she said. And I just want to say, just for the purposes of this podcast, I am going to be misgendering Sandy Peggy, the cisgendered nurse. I'm going to be referring to him as he. I do think it's funny that a lot of these turfy, gender critical sorts, that's what they are, they're sorts, you know? Right old sort. That's what I say to them. When I was at the LGBT Alliance conference that I crashed, I said to them, you're being a bit of a sort right now, actually. Being a bit of an all sort. A bit of a licorice all sort is what you're behaving like. I think that a lot of these sorts, these types, these scamps, not to be too bold with my language, they think they're doing something clever by doing this sort of organised misgendering. You know, a lot of people who previously were more than happy to refer to trans women, for example, as, if not she, her, or women, at least trans women or they. Not that I think that's good, but they, you know, had this sort of mentality of like, well, live and let live, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't affect me. But then because everything has got so bizarre and toxic and demented in not just this country, but in lots of countries, and it's getting worse. Not to be the bearer of bad news. Fascism's up. It's on the rise. If you're in the stock market, you want to be buying fascism right now. Buy, buy, buy. To quote NSYNC. Is it NSYNC? You don't know what the boy bands are these days. The boy bands are girl bands. The girl bands are boy bands. You don't know where you stand. Dare I say, they used to all be a little bit more reasonable, a little bit more live and let live, blah, blah, blah. But now, because they think they're in a war of ideas, a war of decency, etc., they have collectively decided we're not going to capitulate to you anymore. Which is, you know, their prerogative, whatever. But I don't know if they realise that most people, when they hear someone referring to a trans woman as he or whatever, most people think that looks stupid and is needlessly cruel. And I know that these people don't care. I just want them to be aware that most normal, functioning individuals look at them and listen. They may have their feelings about the trans people or whatever. They may think trans people, maybe they don't get it, you know. But one thing they do get is that they get that when you purposely misgender somebody just to make a political point, you look like a dickhead. You look like an absolute lemon. I mean, she says, I told Beth I felt it was unacceptable that he was in the female changing area. Like, I've had this, right? Like, for example, my dad, God love him. Love my dad. He's a good guy, you know. We've had our ups and downs. Transitioning wasn't easy. And he tries his best, you know, he does. He genders me correctly 95% of the time. But even after like 13 years, he'll still slip up occasionally, you know? And I'm not too hard on him. I get frustrated. I get annoyed about it because it's like, come on, 13 years. Like, I think if my dad wanted to, he could learn to become a pro skateboarder in 13 years. He could do 13 years, that's long enough for him to learn how to do a 900 air. Or he could get a business degree. Or my dad could have trained to be a doctor himself in 13 years. And you think to yourself, wow, like, you can't get this together in 13 years. A single linguistic shift. But as I say, I go easy on the guy because he's a good guy. But what I'm saying is, sometimes when we've been in public and he mistakenly misgenders me, I see the reaction to it And it's not, embarrassment for me. It's not agreement. It's confusion. It doesn't gel in people's heads. They see me and then they see that and they go, wait a minute, what am I missing here? I just don't think they think they're being smart, don't they? They think they're being really clever, but they don't realise that they look dumb. Dr. Upton has denied getting undressed during the exchange. So if that's true, that she didn't even get undressed during the time in the room, this Sandy Peggy character, he is a real snowflake, It's really, really embarrassing for them. But just to be clear, if Dr. Upton had started getting undressed in there, that's her right. She needs somewhere to get undressed too. She's a doctor and a woman. A trans woman, yes, but under the NHS guidelines, she actually was allowed to do that. Then, I don't know about now. Who knows what's going on now? But at the time period, 2023, when this occurred, she was within her rights. Also, it was on Christmas Eve. That's another thing that I often think with these TERFs. I think Christmas Eve, take a day off. Even the Germans and the British soldiers during World War II had a game of football on Christmas. Do you remember? You've heard that story? It's probably apocryphal. I've never seen any proper evidence of it. But you learn about it in school. Like, the Nazis and the British, they had a game of football on Christmas Day in the snow. Have you heard that? And then you think, well, who was the referee? Switzerland? If they can do it, if the gosh darn Nazis can do it, I think Nurse Sandy Peggy can do it. Where's your Christmas spirit? These TERFs are supposed to be traditionalists. Oh, you're so conservative and traditionalist. But you're not going to take a day off on Christmas Eve? Give me a break. I don't even know, this Dr. Upton, she might have been covered in blood from some sort of ER-style shenanigan. NHS guidance states that trans men and women are allowed to use the changing rooms that align with their gender identity. And as I say, so they should. I mean, listen, not to be too on the nose about it, but where do trans people go to medically transition? For the most part, the hospital, the NHS. My hormones and such, guess where they come from? The NHS. I pay for them, but they come through the NHS. So you're going to tell me that this National Health Service that transformed me into the coquettish, sex symbol starlet of femininity that you see before you, you're telling me that they're going to turn me into this and then not let me use the right changing room? That's just cruel. That's just twisted. Last month, it was decided that the tribunal would be heard in public and that Miss Peggy, the nurse, Mr. I call her, and her legal team were allowed to refer to Dr. Upton as a man. Now, when I heard that first, I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was shocked. Because, this Dr. Upton, the trans woman in this, she's a trans woman. She lives as a trans woman. She lives as a woman every day. Legally. And the court was like, yeah, it's fine. You can refer to her however the hell you want. Would that happen in any other context? I don't think it would. Would it be acceptable for someone to be like, well, it's my belief that I see trans people as dogs. Literally dogs, that's what I believe. So I want to be able to refer to them in court as little puppies. You'd be laughed out of the court. But for some reason, when it's trans people, there's always an exception, isn't there? There's always like a kind of understanding that, yeah, well, that's your right. It's like, shut up, is it? If not, just for the reason of the fact that, like, I don't care if you go on some spiel about, well, I believe that biologically, technically, actually, the chromosomes say that I should be allowed to. No, you know that to a trans woman, the most offensive thing that you can say to them is to call them a man. That's public knowledge. That's known. And it's known because the media and British society has been doing that for God knows how long. You know that the ultimate dehumanization tactic is to call a trans woman a man, or vice versa. As ignorant as you are, Sandy Peggy, you know what you're doing. This whole court case, in my opinion, in my unlegal opinion, is nothing more than a political statement. It's constructed, devised, not to get too conspiratorial, but listen, these TERF gender critical groups, they got their fingers in some pies. Some hot pies. Some apple pies. Shout out McDonald's apple pies. Wish I had a McDonald's apple pie right about now. I love those things. I would say that the McDonald's apple pie is the best single product that McDonald's do. It is. I'm sorry, listen. They do some other good stuff. I'm not a huge McDonald's head generally. I think it's overrated. I think it's unfulfilling. I think the burgers are small and I don't think they do chicken well at all. Their fries are quite nice. I do think ultimately they're an evil conglomerate. But that apple pie, I'm a fan. I'll go to my deathbed saying that. You can put that on my gravestone. I don't even care if you gender me correctly on the gravestone. Just as long as you put on there, Jen loved an apple pie. The nurse also confirmed that she had, quote, strong opinions and an admiration for US President Donald Trump. That's a red flag. You shouldn't need me to tell you why that's a red flag, because obviously that shows an allegiance to unmitigated, bizarre fascism. It shows a sympathy for sex offenders. But even more than that, even more concerning in my opinion, even more of a red flag, is that Nurse Sandy Peggy, as far as I'm aware, is not American. There is nothing worse than a UK MAGA. That's a nightmare. If you identify with the MAGA movement and you're from somewhere in the United Kingdom / Scotland, you need to have your flipping head checked. You need to have the back of your head opened up, and you need to let doctors like Dr. Beth Upton, you need to let them have a little look around in there. Because you got a broken brain. One text from the nurse said he, although it says she, but remember I'm misgendering them. One text from the nurse said she was shaking like a leaf after encountering Dr. Upton in the changing room, adding, everyone sticks up for the minority. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. So one of the common things that is used as an excuse for the segregation of and the continued harassment of trans people, specifically trans women in this instance, is the idea that our presence could be triggering for a cisgender woman who has potentially encountered some sort of sexual abuse or domestic violence. I have an unending amount of empathy for anyone who's been put through a situation like that. But this oversimplification of life, this oversimplification of gender and sexuality and binary identities, what it ultimately results in is it just results in victims being excluded. I mean, no one ever wants to talk about the fact that trans women also suffer sexual abuse. They also suffer violence at the hands of men and sometimes women. And non-binary people. I got my eye on you. Unfortunately, that whole thing has been completely weaponized in order to exclude us from anywhere where we might need to be. And it's very difficult for me to have too much sympathy for someone like Sandy Peggy, who hasn't stated that that's the situation that she's in. She's not talking about any particular trauma. When she ends the sentence with, everyone sticks up for the minority, I think that when people complain about minorities getting special treatment, etc., etc., or everyone, being on their side, you have to be wary of that. Because I think it demonstrates a lack of emotional intelligence that is, in my opinion, terrifying. It shows that I don't think people like Sandy Peggy really know what a minority means, what it is. And the idea that minorities experience some sort of privilege in which everyone sticks up for them is the most tone-deaf, unobservant thing ever. Especially nowadays, it's just not true, is it? Oh yeah, everyone sticks up for the minority. That's why I'm being allowed to misgender you in court. That's why your name's being dragged through the mud. That's why I've gotten away with absolute murder, terrible behaviour over a 30-year period of being a nurse, and only now am I getting reprimanded for some of it because I, was cajoled, probably. Not saying actually, but my conspiracy is cajoled into making some huge political spectacle out of this. I mean, listen, if we're going to talk about minorities, let's talk about trans doctors. How many trans doctors have you seen? When I heard about this case, I was like, a trans doctor? What? I know they theoretically exist, but I've never knowingly met one. I wish I had. I wish there had been a couple at the goddamn gender clinic. But there weren't. Trans people usually are not very well represented in the medical field. So the fact that this Dr. Upton managed to, claw her way up there and actually become a doctor, and now you're going to tell us she can't even use the flipping changing room? Let her do her job. It's this whole thing of well, listen, who's the one with the problem here? In this scenario, who's the one kicking up a fuss? Who's the one uncomfortable? Mr. Sir Sandy Peggy, the nurse. So maybe she is the one who ought to find a different place to change. I don't think that's unreasonable. I think if you're the one who has the issue, I'm sorry if this sounds cold, but we're in cold times now. You go find a place to change. So in response, the transgender doctor, Dr. Beth Upton, she made a complaint back, and her complaint alleged that Miss Peggy, which this isn't any way a comment on anyone's appearance or anything like that, but her name sounds like Miss Piggy. She's a Miss Peggy. Miss Piggy. I'm just drawing attention to that. I just think it's funny. I'd say, who's your husband? Kermit. Hey, Miss Peggy, who's your husband? Kermit the frog from the Muppets. And I'd say, you're being a Muppet.
Hey, I'm Jen's personal AI advert bot, model 882,374,932. Why not become a member to Lobotomy World? You get access to exclusive members-only videos and it helps support Jen to do her podcast. Or you can become a Patreon at patreon.com/lobotomyworld. Okay, thanks, I need to return back to the computer mainframe world, so I gotta go by now.
But Dr. Upton's complaint alleged that Miss Peggy left a patient who was in a serious condition when the doctor appeared in the cubicle. Now, I don't really understand the whole geography of all this. It's a bit confusing. But Dr. Upton is alleging that the nurse, Miss Peggy, the turfy nurse, she's sort of like so against sharing this space with a trans person, a gross, horrible transsexual, that she ran away, endangering a patient. Obviously, if that's true, that is a level of transphobia that is kind of impressive, in a way. It's like, I've seen transphobia before, but like, gosh, like, you're gonna let someone have a cardiac arrest in the hallway? I'm not saying that's what she did, but let's just pretend. You do that? That's impressive transphobia. It was alleged that Miss Peggy, the nurse, asked Dr. Upton to complete observations for her, a task which would normally be completed by a nurse. Like, why is she doing this? Like, I know that you've been there for 30 years, but that doesn't always mean that you know best. Just because you've been in the NHS for 30 years doesn't mean that you're the boss, you know? It seems to me that this Sandy Peggy nurse, it seems to me that she has a bit of a superiority complex, really. She sees this trans doctor and she thinks, who do you think you are? This is my ward. I'm the ward of this ward. The lawyer, Jane Russell, who I assume is Dr. Upton's lawyer, the good one, not the evil one, said, I'm going to do this in a lawyer voice. Your dislike of Dr. Upton was so strong that you refused to work with her to the disadvantage of patients, said lawyer Jane Russell. Miss Peggy was also accused of delegating jobs which Dr. Upton had asked her to do. So she's just like, she reckons she's not taking orders from no transsexuals. She's like, a transsexual telling me how to run my ward? Get out. I've seen this sort of behaviour before. Not so much the whole trans element of it, but the kind of the 30-year veteran who thinks that, you know, the way that she's always done something is the way. I used to work in learning disabilities care as a trans woman, undisclosed, not undisclosed, people knew, but I did it, you know, I did it. No one ever had any problems with me. And if they did have a problem with me, they were more than entitled to tell me, and I would have been like, fine, whatever. It genuinely makes me sad to think that if I wanted to get into that work today, there would probably be so many barriers of entry. There would probably be so many insecurities now, what with all of this stuff. So many restrictions probably on what kind of care I could do, that it would turn me away. It would make me not want to do care work. Despite my very varied history of care work, despite the fact that actually I was a really good carer. Not the best. Flawed individual, but I cared. I genuinely cared. And I did well. And I'm sure there are lots of trans people who would be brilliant carers. In fact, some of the best carers I ever met were people from the queer community. Not all of them, but some are the best. But when you work in care, or any kind of care job, you'll have people there who are really well-intentioned, and they've been in the job for a really long time, maybe like 30 years, 20 years, 15 years, a while, longer than really you should be in a care job for. Because, you know, you do get jaded after a while. Most people do. And one of the big problems is if you've been in a job for the same job for like 30 years, sometimes people can adapt really well to changes in the way things are. But a lot of the time, people kind of get stuck in their ways a little bit. And I witnessed this a little bit in care. You know, you get these older carers who, and again, not all of them, some of the best carers I ever met were older people. But some of the worst carers I ever met were also older people, because they would really be insistent that their way was the right way, even though it went against all of the sort of regulations, was actually dangerous, involved, you know, unnecessary manual handling, things like that. Sometimes, just because you've got a lot of experience and you've been on the ward for 30 years, it don't mean that what you're doing is the best. Sometimes it's very difficult for these types of professionals to take constructive criticism. And that's the vibe I'm getting from Miss Peggy. Whether the Supreme Court ruling affects the tribunal's findings is uncertain, as NHS guidance at the time of the complaint was that trans men and women were allowed to use the changing rooms that aligned with their gender identity. See, this is what I was saying earlier. It's like, this is why this case is kind of fundamental. This is why it's really interesting to see where it goes. I don't like getting bogged down in a lot of this, like, depressing trans stuff. You know, I'm really trying to make an effort at the moment to not obsess over news stories that are distressing or like stupid. But this one, as stupid as it is, and it is stupid, it does feel like it's going to be setting a precedent, and it does feel kind of like it's testing. It's testing the NHS, and it's testing this country right now. Essentially, it's the test to see if structures like the NHS or the government or the courts are able to impart fairness and dignity to trans people. And again, not to be too much of a negative Nancy, but all signs point to, I don't think it's going to go the way we want it to. And the only reason I say that is because I feel like that has been the emergent pattern over the last 5 or 6 years. It's like, I feel like everybody's just got very comfortable with the idea that trans people are going to be the scapegoat. We are going to be losing our dignity, and we deserve to. That's what it feels like is happening. And I got that feeling straight away when I learned that, you know, Miss Peggy was allowed to misgender Dr. Upton in court. I just thought, well, I guess the gloves are off, you know. I guess we're at least on the same page now. You know, at least we know that the courts don't really care about trans people's dignity. Because if you're entering the courtroom with that level of disrespect on you, if you're entering it, you know, feeling as crap as that's going to make you feel, how are you going to have faith in any of these systems? I don't even understand. Like, it's one of those things where it makes me think, like, wow, it's a testament to Dr. Beth Upton that she even still wants to even be a doctor. I guess if you want to be a doctor, you have to really want to be a doctor, right? That's why you train to be a doctor, because you want to help people. But I feel like if I was training to be a doctor and then they were like, well, you can be a doctor, but you just can't have any respect, I don't know if I'd be strong enough to be like, that's fine. Okay then. So this bit here that I'm reading is from a BBC article, and this bit kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. And when I say it rubbed me the wrong way, I mean it was like that, you know. I was like, stop rubbing me that way. It says here, groups on both sides of the transgender debate. Can we please stop saying both sides of the transgender debate? It's not a helpful way to categorize it. It doesn't make sense, okay? How about we view it like this? On one side, there are trans people who want just to live their lives with bodily autonomy and dignity and respect and be able to carve out a little piece of the world for themselves and to be treated normally and respectfully by society. And then on the other side, there are these weaselly, freakish, mean-spirited, biologically essentialist, deeply conservative weirdos who want to strip rights away from us. If that's both sides of a debate, what are we debating here? I'm not debating. This podcast is not a debate. A lot of trans people, we're over debate. You know, we don't have time for debate anymore. Debate is academic. Debate's like, oh yes, I'm going to have a debate. Oh, are you going to the debate society tonight? We're going to be talking about Christopher Hitchens. Nerd. You geek. We're not debating. I'm saying we deserve better than this. We deserve more than this. Honestly. Trans people deserve more than this. Society is failing us. We are being... Make no mistake. Right, let me just get serious for a second on my soapbox. Stuff like this court hearing and all this nonsense, this is a societal failure towards trans people. It's like when trans people are being accused of being mental. You know, you're mental, you're trans, you're mental. This is unrelated and I might talk about it another time. But I was reading about the Jeffrey Epstein case. Heard of him? It's, that's my little guilty pleasure. I like to know what's going on in the world. That's my guilty pleasure. And the whole Epstein thing, it's very, it's interesting. You can't deny it. And it feels like information is eking out and everyone's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Are people going to be held to account? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I saw this article about how one of the first public accusers of Jeffrey Epstein was a trans woman. And when she was a teenager, she was assaulted by Jeffrey Epstein. And I was reading over some of the court documents from it. And it was fascinating to see how she was characterized by the defense as being mentally ill because she was trans. So it's this whole thing, it was like, how can we believe her about the things she's saying about Epstein when she's clearly not so because she wants to get a vagina? And then what happened? You tell me. Look at it now. Look at the mess we're in now. So what I'm saying is it might be good to listen to us for a change. And understand that most of the mental health issues that trans people experience are most probably because society makes it very difficult for trans people to exist peacefully. I guarantee you that in a non-transphobic environment, I would thrive. I'd be unstoppable. I'd be a monster. Not a bad monster, but a powerhouse. I'd be running this flipping country. Or at least be earning more. But I find it difficult because, I'm on antidepressants up the wazoo. And I'm reading about stupid stuff like this every day. Here's an interesting wrinkle to this case that isn't directly related to the trans issue, but is definitely worth discussing. So the nurse at the centre of this tribunal nurse Sandy Peggy, told colleagues she wanted to post bacon through the letterbox of a local mosque. Sandy Peggy made the comment at a work lunch with colleagues, along with other remarks insulting transgender people, according to testimony from Fiona Wishart, another nurse with NHS Fife. Although obviously that's not directly related to this specific transgender issue, I think it's good for us to know about it, right? Because it clearly paints a picture of the sort of woman that Sandy Peggy is. It's clear, at least to me, through reading these testimonials, that Sandy Peggy is not a particular fan of minorities, right? We heard her comment before about minorities, and now we're hearing this. Among the comments were, quote, "What goes around comes around. Pakistan has been flooding Britain for years," and crude jokes about Asian people. So as you can see here, she loves Trump. She don't like transgenders. And she is not keen on Muslims and all their dietary requirements. And she doesn't like immigration as a concept, which I think explains the joke about flooding. And you see she's making the connection there about, flooded with immigrants. And then, you get the joke. It's not a joke. It's not funny in any kind of way. The only real audience for that sort of joke is probably on 4chan or maybe a YouTube comment section, possibly. Definitely not work appropriate. And I just think it's worth us knowing about this because, as I say, it just builds a sort of character profile. It just sort of helps to paint a picture of the kind of person that Sandy Peggy clearly is. Other colleagues had told her Miss Peggy had referred to Dr. Upton as weirdo, freak, and it. Now that's classic transphobia. That's like when you drink a Coke Classic and you go, that's classic taste. It. I've been called it in the street, and it's always a funny experience. You just go, it. Can't do any better than that. Come on, you got the whole Little Britain back catalogue that you could take from. You could sing Dude Looks Like a Lady. That's a classic one as well. Man, I feel like a woman. You know all the ones. It. Later testimony by nurse Lindsay Nichol said Miss Peggy had used those terms in conversation and in WhatsApp group for a group of nurses who sometimes holidayed together. I'll tell you what, don't let those nurses go on holiday together. They have a wine and they go a little bit transphobic. Oh, I'll tell you what, I get a couple of Pinot Grigios in me and I just start going off about the Pakistani floods. You know what? I know I can't have white wine. I know it's holiday. I can't have white wine. I get very Islamophobic. According to messages from the chat, Dr. Upton's looks were mocked and was referred to as having a pathetic voice by Miss Peggy in the chat. I want to hear this Miss Peggy's voice. I want to hear it. I want to compare it. We're often made fun of because of our voices. I'd like to see you go from a low post-puberty register and work your way up. I'd like to see you work your way up in the way that Dr. Beth Upton has managed to become a flippin' doctor. Oh, I'm sorry that Dr. Beth Upton's voice isn't feminine enough for you or, passing enough for you. I think she was too busy getting her fucking doctorate. I'm sorry, trans women are superheroes. We are brilliant. We achieve so much. And do we get credit for it? No, we don't. We don't get any. I tell you what, I get no respect. Oh, let me tell you, I get no respect. I think Miss Cunningham is Sandy Peggy's lawyer. I might be wrong on that, but I think that's the case. Miss Cunningham suggested it was not wholly unfair to call Dr. Upton a weirdo, and that if any man walked into a women's changing rooms, they would be considered a voyeur, and therefore it would be reasonable to suggest that they were what the lawyer called a creep or a weirdo. Well, the thing is, though, this is what happens when you oversimplify situations. This is what happens when you have no nuance or education or care about the actual reality of people's lived experiences and lives. I know a lot of people like to be essentialist and like to be biologically rigid, but the truth is, when you do that, you're just discounting reams and reams and reams and reams of circumstantial situations that negate what you're saying. Because Dr. Beth Upton is not a man in the changing rooms. As much as you say she is, she isn't. She's a trans woman and a doctor, a professional at the job who just needs to get changed in the place that she is, by policy of the NHS at the time, legally allowed to do. So, not a fan of this lawyer. And listen, I know she's just doing her job. You know, sometimes you got to defend bad people. I know that. But, you know, not this bad. Stick to the perverts and the murderers. Don't be defending TERFs. Jesus. This was in reference to an incident where Miss Peggy had messaged a colleague's husband by accident and asked for a picture of the weirdo, thinking she was messaging a different colleague. Isn't this all just a little bit high school? Doesn't this all just feel a little bit unnecessary, a little bit bitchy? It definitely feels that way to me. Sorry, is this a hospital ward, or is it Mean Girls the movie? You can't sit with us. Miss Nichol also said Miss Peggy spoke to her after a family member came out as gay. She said she was devastated about a family member being gay and asked me how I coped with 2 family members being gay. God, I thought it was hard enough having 1 homo in the family. You've got 2? Look, if I haven't convinced you by now that this Sandy Peggy character appears to be not the nicest individual in the world, surely this says it all. Because do you know what? One of the things about these gender criticals is that they like to pretend that they just want to go back to the old LGB. They just want it to be about sexual attraction. And you know what? It's absolutely fine. Things were simpler then. Gay was gay. Lesbian was lesbian. You knew where you stood. We got all our rights. Don't have any problem with the gays. It's just the horrible transsexuals that we don't like. But I think what this shows is that a lot of these gender critical people, it's very unusual to just have one form of prejudice. You know, prejudices tend to hang out with each other. None of us are perfect. We've all got our blind spots. But Miss Peggy, she's collecting them. Muslims, Pakistanis, transgenders, the gays. Does she like anyone? The reason why this freaks me out so much as well is because as a trans woman, I have nowadays a little bit of a fear, in all honesty, or certainly an anxiety about going to the hospital. I don't want to go. Now, I don't want to be in that situation. You know, if I'm ill, I would like to imagine that I could go to hospital and be treated for said illness in a dignified, respectful way, just as anybody should. unfortunately, the messaging that things like this gives trans people, and not just stuff like this, but the whole infrastructure of the NHS and the whole uncertainty that there is now after the Supreme Court ruling, I feel like I wouldn't be safe necessarily, because you don't know who your nurses are going to be. You don't know, if they're going to be transphobic or not. And on top of that, you don't know if there's going to be a structure in place where if they were transphobic, that would be overridden by the desire by the organisation to administer dignified care to you as a person. Because all the messaging I get from the NHS at the moment is, fuck you, you're trans, fuck you. Oh, you're transgender, get fucked. Get in the bin. Oh, you want to be on a women's ward? Fuck off. You need to go in the bin. I've got it on good authority that trans people are being treated in dustbins in the NHS. Last time I was near a hospital, I saw by all the dustbins and the medical waste, there was a sign that said, tranny area. And I just don't think that's good enough, to be honest with you. And it might seem like I'm joking, but I'm telling you, sometimes science fiction is less about predicting the future and more about predicting the present. And I'm telling you, it ain't far till we get there. Not to be the harbinger of doom and gloom. But is it fair that I should feel like I don't belong at the hospital? Like, is it fair that I feel an anxiety and a stress about if I'm going to be respected by care staff? It's stuff like this that makes people go, I just won't go. I'll just die in my home the way society wants me to. And that's just not a good framework to have. That's not a good frame of mind to be in. It's not ideal, Kathy. Not one little bit. So yeah, that's where we're kind of up to on the case. I think they're taking a recess at the moment, and I think they're expected to have the whole thing sorted out by September, which is obviously quite a while. But I'll tell you, I'm going to keep an eye on it. And I'm not going to talk about it every week, but I'm definitely going to be keeping one of my beady little eyes on this mess. And we'll see. I'm hoping that, the courts have some sense. I'm hoping that Sandy Peggy continues to show her arse for who she really is. But at this point, in this world that we're in right now, where it's fashionable and chic to be a dick, to be like a real piece of shit, I don't know. I don't know how much, don't know how much we can rely on the courts. But I'll keep my eye on it. This is court journalist Jan Ives reporting for duty. I'm not going to go up to Scotland and sit in the court. Hello. Do you remember at the start of the podcast when I said that my battery was on 65% and that I was just going to wing it by the seat of my pants? Well, guess what? The battery ran out because I was, ranting quite a lot. But I didn't want to go without saying goodbye. That felt rude. And I like to go on a more upbeat note sometimes. So listen, again, thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, you should probably subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. It's really exciting seeing this channel grow. I'm enjoying it and I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I had a couple of people email me recently and I haven't responded to them yet, and I apologise. I've just been a bit busy. If that's you, don't panic. I will get to it. I try to answer all my emails, but life can get in the way a little bit. So I will, I'll get around to it. Okay, don't panic. Remember, you can become a member if you want to. You get access to exclusive episodes, members episodes. You can also get them by joining the Patreon, patreon.com/lobotomyworld. And yeah, that's it really. Thank you. Talk to you later. Okay, bye.
There are the doctors on. Don't talk to me about doctors. The only time I ever meet a doctor, I'm carrying a bedpan.
In view of what happened this afternoon, nurse, I feel I was entirely justified. But I don't propose to discuss your behavior any further.
You have no right to interfere with my private life. Why don't you tell the truth? You don't approve of nurses being friendly with the doctors.
Not when they're on duty.
You seem to expect us to behave like machines. We're human, aren't we? Suppose you want us all to grow into frustrated old spinsters.